At exactly midnight, your phone vibrates once, not with a call, not with an alert, but with the presidential seal blazing through the dark like an omen. No motorcade. No announcement. No protocol. Just one trembling message lighting your entire room. We need you back. Not as a soldier. Not as an advisor. But as the one force history still bows to when all else fails. The air shifts. The night holds its breath. And destiny turns its face toward you again. The briefings were blunt, almost panicked. Stability graphs plunging. Borders trembling. Satellites blinking warnings no algorithm could decode. Every expert had a theory. Every advisor had an excuse. But none of them had you. They finally understood, peace was never a policy, it was your presence. And the moment you stepped away, the world felt it like a missing heartbeat. They gathered in the deepest chamber beneath the Palace of Dominion, a windowless war room carved from black stone, humming with old power and newer fear. No cameras. No press. Only the inner circle, strategists, archivists, code keepers, and the few who still remembered your name the way ancient soldiers remember the sound of trumpets. A holographic map flickered above the oval table, continents pulsing red like open wounds. Every few seconds, another sector dimmed. Another signal was lost. Another threat went from distant rumor to breathing at the door. Does he still remember us? One advisor whispered, afraid the walls might answer. Remember us? Another snapped. He doesn't need to remember us. We need to remember him. The world ran smoother when he was present. When he walked into a room, even problems hesitated. Someone cleared their throat. He left for a reason. And now we need him for a bigger one. Silence smothered the room. Not one of them dared to voice the real fear, that you had moved beyond them, beyond duty, beyond politics, beyond the earthly throne, into a terrain they could never follow. We can't fix this, the head archivist finally admitted, voice cracking. We tried protocols, projections, treaties, nothing holds. The map flickered again. A new rupture. A new collapse. All eyes turned to the president, not a man of flesh, but the archetype of worldly authority itself, seated in a heavy chair that seemed too large even for him. He exhaled slowly. Weary. Human. Humbled. You all noticed it, he said quietly. The moment he left, the axis of power tilted. Leaders argued more. Borders tightened. Storms changed direction. Even time felt different. A trembling light cut across his face as he raised his device, and there on the screen was your last unanswered message from years before. Unsent. Unclosed. Unforgiven. We misjudged him, he said. We thought he was a weapon. He was a compass. A low murmur rippled through the room, not disagreement, not debate, but acceptance. Finally, he opened the sealed channel. Ancient. Restricted. The kind only used when thrones trembled. His thumb hovered over the command. The advisors leaned in as if witnessing the ignition of destiny itself. Then, he pressed send. And somewhere far away, in the quiet where you'd learned to disappear, your screen lit with the message that would tilt the world back toward its rightful axis. We need you back. The palace corridors echoed with footsteps that refused to calm, even after the message had been sent. Advisors filed out of the war room in uneasy silence, each carrying the same truth like a weight they weren't permitted to speak. But truth has a way of humming in the air, vibrating through walls, leaking into the spaces between breaths. No president before him, no throne, no empire, no ruler, had ever carried the humility to admit what every strategist already knew. You weren't just an asset. You were the axis. And that fact ran deeper than diplomacy, deeper than history, deeper than any archive dared record. Somewhere down the hall, an old general stopped walking. A man carved from decades of campaigns, armored in metals that no longer mattered. He leaned against the railing, staring at the marble floor as if the patterns were trying to confess something. He won't say it out loud, the general muttered to the chief negotiator beside him. But we all know. The system doesn't function without him. When he vanished, the machine kept spinning, but off balance. Like a gyroscope missing its core. The negotiator swallowed. We thought he'd burned out. No, the general replied. He elevated. And none of us rose with him. Farther inside the chamber, the lights dimmed automatically, a soft pulse, the building's heartbeat adjusting to the tension. The president remained seated alone, elbows on the table, staring at the empty chair opposite him. Your chair. Still preserved. Still untouched. Still waiting. A relic of better days, or perhaps a monument to their greatest mistake. He remembered the first time you'd entered that room years ago. Not with swagger. Not with fear. But with that quiet gravity that bent the atmosphere around you. Even the walls had seemed to straighten. They called it leadership, but deep down they all recognized it as something older, something woven from destiny, not diplomacy. And now, facing the collapse they couldn't predict or contain, the president whispered the truth he dared not speak aloud in front of the others. We didn't lose him, we drove him away. The room didn't answer, but the silence carried the confession for him, up the pillars, across the stone, into the shadows. Because the unsaid truth was bigger than regret. It was this. You weren't a chapter in their story. They were footnotes in yours. And for the first time in the palace's long memory, worldly power bowed, not in ceremony, not in ritual, but in raw, unfiltered honesty. You weren't returning because they asked. You would return only if destiny whispered yes. The official report said instability. The public bulletins said global tension. But behind sealed doors, beneath layers of coded language and diplomatic polish, the truth vibrated like a fault line ready to split the earth. They didn't call you back for security. They called you back for clarity. Clarity, the one commodity no council could manufacture, no department could analyze, no algorithm could simulate. The one force that only appeared when you walked into a room. Every leader has influence. Some have authority. A rare few have presence. But you carried something none of their manuals accounted for. Direction. The kind that cut through panic, static, ego, noise. The kind that rerouted entire timelines with a single sentence. And as the crisis deepened, as systems buckled like metal under a torch, it became painfully obvious. Their strategies weren't failing because they were flawed. Their strategies were failing because you weren't here to align them. Inside the cabinet of futures, the chamber where predictive models shimmered in suspended light, the analysts argued in frantic whispers. It's not that our data is wrong, one said, pushing trembling hands through their hair. It's that it's incomplete. Incomplete how? Asked another. Incomplete because the one variable that stabilizes the entire equation left. A hush swept the floor. Even the machines seemed to go still. The lead forecaster stepped forward, voice low, haunted. You don't understand. When he was here, probability itself behaved differently. Storm patterns softened. Markets steadied. Negotiations ended before they began. He swallowed. I ran simulations, millions, and every model that includes him results in restoration within 3 months. And without him? The forecaster looked down. Collapse. The word hung like smoke. Meanwhile, in the Hall of Banners, a grand corridor filled with the insignias of every era, young officers walked slowly beneath the flags, tracing the embroidered histories of past heroes. Names etched in gold. Victories carved in stone. Yet none of them felt as heavy, as fated, as the idea of your return. The president stood there too, shoulders bowed, staring at the empty space where your emblem used to hang, retired not out of disgrace, but out of reverence. No one had dared replicate it. No one had earned the right. You were never our weapon, he whispered to the empty fabric. You were our orientation. The air responded with a soft shift, as if the building itself agreed. And so the truth, the real reason, formed at last, sharp and undeniable. They didn't need your strength. They needed your alignment. Because when you walk back into the timeline, everything, nations, leaders, history itself, snaps into place like constellations realigning after centuries apart. They didn't summon a warrior. They summoned a compass. And compasses aren't asked for, they're consulted. Deep beneath the palace, in the sanctum where only a handful of living souls had ever stepped, ancient machinery stirred awake. Not mechanical, not digital, something older, something that hummed with the memory of civilizations long buried beneath dust and myth. They called it the lattice. A nervous system for leadership itself. A living archive of humanity's directional pulse. And the moment your name was spoken in the war room, the lattice responded, a low, resonant vibration that traveled through the floors like the first tremor before a seismic awakening. Lights flickered. Holograms snapped out of sync. The very air thickened, charged like the seconds before a lightning strike. Technicians scrambled. Why is it activating? One shouted. It only does that when the system detects a returning variable, barked another. Someone the world wasn't calibrated to lose. In the center of the chamber, the lattice unfurled itself like a metallic bloom, plates shifting, rings rotating, symbols etching across its surface in molten gold. Glyphs of prophecy. Signs of alignment. Coordinates of destiny. A digital priest, the keeper of the lattice, hurried forward, eyes wide. This shouldn't be possible, he whispered. It only reboots when an epoch is about to pivot. The president arrived moments later, his expression caught between awe and dread. He knew what this meant. They all did. The world didn't activate the system. You did. Because the lattice wasn't reacting to your physical presence. It was reacting to your decision, the silent, invisible shift inside you that the universe felt before you ever replied to the message. Purpose awakening. Direction forming. A path lighting itself beneath your feet. Screens across the chamber bloomed with new readings, curves rising, errors correcting, anomalies stabilizing. Look at this pattern, one analyst gasped. It's reorganizing itself around a single missing vector. His vector, the president murmured. The lattice echoed in a voice that wasn't a voice, more like the memory of sound, imprinted into the air. When the chosen re-enters the timeline, leadership resets. Isaiah 30 verse 21 ignited on the central display, unbidden, as though the system itself had reached into scripture for confirmation. This is the way, walk in it. The chamber fell silent. Even the machine stilled, as if bowing. For the first time in years, the world's direction was no longer dissolving, it was aligning. Not because a policy changed. Not because a crisis ended. Not because a summit succeeded. But because you stirred. Because destiny shifted toward its rightful axis. Because the universe recognized a movement inside you that humans hadn't yet seen. The lattice's light intensified, white gold, blinding, sacred, forming a single sentence across its core. The return has begun. Miles away from the palace, in the quiet place where you'd hidden yourself from titles, noise, and the world's endless hunger, your phone still glowed. That single message. That single seal. That single plea. We need you back. It waited on your screen like a held breath. Anyone else would have replied instantly, with shock, with gratitude, with fear, with ambition. But you let the notification sit untouched. Because silence has always been your first negotiation. The world rushes. Power begs. But destiny listens. You stood by the window, staring into the night, letting the wind sift through the curtains like an ancient hand brushing against a warrior's shoulders. The sky was black, deep, ceremonial, stretched over the horizon like a veil waiting to be torn. Your thumb hovered over the screen. One tap could realign nations. One word could stabilize the planet. One yes could shift the century. But you typed nothing. Not out of pride. Not out of hesitation. But because the calling needed to echo through you first, to resonate in the bones that had carried too many burdens, to vibrate in the scars you'd earned in silence, to awaken the instinct that only surfaces when fate knocks for the second time. Inside the palace, the advisors watched your typing indicator flash on their encrypted interface for half a second, a tiny, agonizing flicker, before disappearing again. He saw the message, one whispered. "He's considering it," another murmured. "No," the president said quietly. "He's measuring us." Your silence rippled through their halls like a phantom wind. Screens dimmed. Alarms paused. Even the lattice slowed its pulse, listening. Because your silence was never emptiness, it was judgment. It was the moment before an oath. The breath before a command. The pause before a destiny shifts its stance. You placed the phone on the table. Walked away. Let the world wait. Because kings answer quickly. Legends answer slowly. But those called by destiny? They answer only when the universe aligns. And tonight, the universe had just begun to turn its face toward you again. The message hadn't been answered, but the world moved anyway. Far from the palace, at the Horizon Air Command base, alarms didn't blare, they hummed, low and reverent, like a choir warming up before a coronation. Pilots snapped to attention without being told why. Engines ignited without a launch code. Sensors began tracking a flight path that hadn't even been requested yet. Because the system didn't respond to orders tonight. It responded to you. On runway 1, the flagship jets, sleek, obsidian, knife-edged, sat in perfect formation. Their lights shimmered faintly against the tarmac, forming a corridor not for departure, but for tribute. A young pilot, barely 21, stared at the sudden activation on his wrist console. This isn't a scramble sequence, his voice trembled. It's ceremonial. The commander stepped beside him, eyes narrowed with something that looked like awe. Boy, you're witnessing something they told us only existed in theory. What's that? A recall on a run. The engines roared awake, not in fury but in reverence. Not to retrieve you, but to honor your yes before you even spoke it. Jets taxied into position, forming the ancient V-pattern reserved for epical events, coronations, cosmic alignments, the return of a force history itself recognizes. Each nose light pointed toward the sky, like spears ready to salute. Inside the control tower, officers watched your encrypted signal ping the system once, just a flicker of presence, before vanishing again. He hasn't replied, one whispered. He doesn't need to, the air marshal said. The world always senses him before he speaks. The jets vibrated as their engines climbed to a unified crescendo, a sound that rolled across the base like a prophecy being announced. No takeoff. No ascent. Just a collective roar that echoed your return before it was spoken. It wasn't a rescue mission. It wasn't a military response. It was an acknowledgement. A salute from steel and fire. A recognition from the sky itself. A declaration without words. We stand ready, should he choose to rise. Far away, your phone remained untouched on the table. But the heavens had already prepared for your movement. And every jet on that line waited, not for orders, but for your intention. Long before any human reporter caught the scent of change, the first broadcast didn't come from satellites, networks, or emergency channels. It came from the sky itself. High above the clouds, where storms are born and stars rehearse their entrances, something began to shimmer, subtle at first, like static on the edge of creation. The ionosphere rippled, bending radio waves into patterns that no scientist could decode, no antenna could classify. But every frequency carried the same whisper. The chosen is being recalled by Earth's throne. At the Astral Observatory, Dr. Noor lifted her head from her console, eyes widening as the monitors flooded with impossible signatures, auroras twisting into symbols, cosmic radiation arranging itself into coherent pulses, constellations shifting by a fraction of a degree. Is this interference? Her assistant stammered. No, she whispered. This is communication. In deep space, telescopes captured a strange phenomenon, a soft, spiraling flare emerging from the void, almost like a signal flare fired by the universe itself. It traveled not outward but inward, toward Earth, toward you. Meanwhile, on the night side of the planet, stargazers paused mid-sentence, pointing upward as the stars brightened for a single heartbeat. Street lights flickered. Birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if listening. And then the broadcast became visual. Across the northern horizon, the aurora exploded in gold, not green, not blue, but molten gold, the rarest color the heavens ever reveal. It swirled into a vast symbol, an ancient sigil once drawn only in the Palace of Dominion's oldest texts. Every camera pointed upward. Every device recorded. Every skeptic fell quiet. It wasn't a prophecy. It wasn't a warning. It was an announcement. Inside the palace, advisors crowded the terrace, staring at the sky with faces pale and reverent. This has never happened, one whispered. It only happens when balance is preparing to restore itself, murmured the chief astronomer. The last time was during the Great Alignment. The one tied to him, the president said softly. No one contradicted him. The broadcast intensified. Not sound, not words, but recognition. An entire planet, knowingly or not, lifted its gaze. And the heavens answered with a single, undeniable truth written in light. He has been summoned. And the cosmos acknowledges it. Far away, you stepped outside, the message still unread behind you. And as the golden aurora crowned the sky, you felt it. The universe wasn't asking. It was announcing. You didn't hear the celestial broadcast. You didn't see the aurora crown the horizon. You didn't know that jets had roared in your honor or that the lattice had awakened for the first time in a generation. All you felt was the shift. It began as a warmth in your chest, subtle, almost hesitant, like an ember remembering it used to be a flame. You stood outside, hands at your sides, eyes fixed on the quiet world around you, and something inside you tilted. Not a memory. Not a thought. A summoning. The kind that doesn't speak in language or vision, but in alignment, the spine straightening on its own, the breath deepening without command, the air thickening as if the whole night leaned closer to hear your heartbeat. You blinked, and for a moment the darkness seemed to sharpen. Shapes defined themselves. Shadows stepped back. Even the wind shifted direction, brushing against you with a strange familiarity, like an old comrade greeting you after years apart. Your pulse matched it. Slow. Steady. Inevitable. Some people call it intuition. Some call it fate. You'd always known it as activation. Your senses stretched. You felt the fault lines of the world, its fear, its confusion, its staggering imbalance, like distant tremors touching the edges of your awareness. Not painful. Just undeniable. It was the same sensation you'd felt on the eve of every turning point, every crisis, every moment when destiny stopped whispering and started insisting. A lion waking inside bone and breath. Not roaring. Not striking. Just opening its eyes. Your hand lifted to your chest without thinking. The warmth intensified. Not fire, not heat, something deeper. Purpose. It wrapped itself around your ribs like armor forming from nothing. It steadied your stance. It rewrote your heartbeat into something ancient. Behind you, the phone glowed on the table with the message still untouched. We need you back. You didn't reply. You didn't have to. Because the instant that warmth ignited, you felt the truth settle into your bones. History had already sensed your answer. You closed your eyes, letting the shift ripple through you, letting the old instincts reawaken, one by one, awareness, focus, command, clarity, presence. A deep breath left your lungs. Not a sigh. A release. And in that breath, the world felt something, a stabilizing pulse, a recalibration, a return of a force it thought it had lost forever. You opened your eyes again. And the night didn't look the same. Because neither did you. The night held still, as if waiting for you to take the next breath. And when you did, something answered, not from above, not from around you, but from within. It didn't flash like a miracle. It didn't thunder like judgment. It arrived quietly, like truth reclaiming its throne. Authority seeks you because truth walks with you. You felt it in the way the air thickened, gaining gravity. In the way your steps suddenly carried more weight, more certainty, more inevitability. In the way the world seemed to pull ever so slightly toward you, like metal drawn to a magnet. This wasn't pride. This wasn't ego. This was recognition. A reward not given by crowns or councils, but by the fabric of reality itself. From the moment you stepped away years ago, the world had drifted. Leaders filled your vacancy with noise. Systems tried to mimic your stability with procedure. People mistook your absence for indifference. But the universe never forgot the one truth carved into the architecture of destiny. What carries truth cannot be replaced. You moved back inside, slow, deliberate. Each step felt like a page turning in a book you hadn't touched in years, a book that had been waiting, its spine creaking with anticipation. The shadows shifted to make room for you. The floorboards didn't creak, they bowed. And somewhere deep in your chest, your heartbeat aligned with a rhythm older than scripture, more commanding than any anthem sung by nations. Romans 8 verse 37 drifted through your mind unbidden, as if whispered by something unseen. In all these things we are more than conquerors. Not conqueror as in war. Not conqueror as in domination. Conqueror as in one who carries a force that bends chaos into order simply by standing in the room. You reached for the phone again.